Hi, and welcome to the Relentless Marketing and PR Podcast. With me, as always, is Katie Atkinson.
And with me, as always, is Lauren Reed. We're two marketers and entrepreneurs, and we're here to share our philosophy on figuring it out, moving forward, and never giving in. Sharon, welcome. Thanks for being here. We're here with Sharon Ball with 9 Paths. She's going to talk to us a little bit about her work with the Enneagram.
Yes, so 9 Paths goes into organizations. We work with the organizational health and work with the personality typing system called the Enneagram. I personally, it's a favorite of mine. I love Strength Finders, the Big Five, DISC, Myers-Briggs, but the Enneagram is a growth mindset. And so when I'm specifically called in for conflict management or working with boards and disagreements or business owners, I really want to push people to grow. That's where we're going to have some restoration or some recovery happen. And so the Enneagram is a great tool for that. It shows not only your strengths, but it also shows your growth areas. And when we're trying to resolve issues, we always need to be looking at what we can grow in.
Sure.
I love that. Yeah. So we discovered the Enneagram as an agency a couple years ago, probably 3 years ago. And
has it been that long? Wow.
Maybe 2, I don't know. But we quickly engaged Sharon to get a better understanding, because I felt like it could be a really dangerous tool if we only went like an inch deep and a mile wide with it. So before we integrated it into our company and our agency, we definitely wanted to work with an expert, and that's where Sharon came in. And we've done DISC, we've done Strength Finders, we've done all of those. But for whatever reason, this is the one tool I think our team has really latched onto and
it's
used.
the one that I have, for
right,
sure.
for sure, because you're a skeptic on like everything.
Yes.
I'm like, oh, it's another personality test.
Yes.
So.
Lauren's making us do something she watched the podcast.
Well, and all of the other ones say I'm just really mean, so I really like this one.
So what the Enneagram does that is a little bit different than the others is get to the underpinning of why we do what we do. Whereas typically we base our opinions and assumptions off of people's behaviors. With the Enneagram, we push you to go beneath the surface. So we don't type based off of the behavior. Oh, she's mean.
Yeah,
it's the motivation.
It's the motivation. Right. What's underpinning why you might be more assertive in a situation and it be labeled as aggressive versus assertive and seeking justice in the situation?
I love that. And as marketers, it's so important for us to understand the motivation of not just our colleagues, but our clients and the people we are marketing to, their audiences and their stakeholders. So the Enneagram, I think, has been a good lens for us, a good tool to look at the lens in which people view the world.
And know that they're all different. There are several different lenses. And so Lauren told me recently that you've been working on some other programs with the Enneagram and using the Enneagram for diversity and inclusion, which I found really interesting.
Yes.
And I will say, we're 3 white women sitting here talking about diversity and inclusion, but I think it's helpful to use the Enneagram to help understand diverse perspectives, and not just diversity in general.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear more about that research and some of the programs you've been doing. So for our listeners, can you give a quick overview of your number and then the numbers Katie and I lead with?
Sure. So this is great because this allows me to give a little bit of a teaching of the Enneagram and the 9 types. And since we have 3 out of the 9 types represented, we have 1 type from each center of intelligence.
But we are also the most assertive, right?
Yes.
Is it aggressive or assertive? I prefer assertive.
I use assertive.
I read aggressive a lot.
Language is key, right? But we're energy outward. Our stances are energy outward. We're going to go after things. It's movement, right? So I start when I teach with the Enneagram, I start with the centers of intelligence, 8, 9, and 1. And Katie is an 8, the protector, the challenger. The body center people, they move with a need to be heard. So for the 8 in particular, they're seekers of justice. What is fair? They root for the underdog. They are powerhouse people. Now in that, the growth and the stretch area for powerhouse 8s, whether male or female, is to slow down their reactivity. Because again, remember, their movement. And when they feel or sense in their body that something is not right, they're going to move into action. So if I'm working with an 8 on a team, I'm going to remind them that that's one of their growth areas, which allows them to be more receptive to the room and what other people have to offer and dig a little bit deeper. And so for Lauren, the 7, well, I'm going to move. Actually, let me move to my style type since it's 2, 3s, and 4s.
Save the best for last.
3. And our need is to be seen and to know our value and our worth. And we often do that through our image or our achievements. How much can we achieve? And the irony in that is when you get behind what a 3, the struggle of the 3 is, that they have defined who they are based off of what they do. We're human doers, not human beings. And so really getting that 3 to relax their type structure and see their value and who they are, not what they do, is very, very key. So I could come at you very assertively with my achievements, but if I'm not an aware 3, you're seeing just what I'm doing, which is kind of sad. You're not getting the whole me. So if I can teach a team member to understand that there's more to that other team member, that 3, get behind why they're doing what they're doing, they might see that assertiveness a little less abrasive and go, As for the 3 to slow down and go, listen, people can love me for who I am, not what I do. Then moving into the head types, which is our 5, 6, and 7s.
Definitely a head type.
And Lauren is our 7, the enthusiast. And for the head types, it is all about the need to feel safe, certain, and secure. And for 7, it looks different than the 5s and 6s. But they are, the upside, what they bring to the table is just this synthesizing movement in their head of ideas and visions and dreams and the movement forward and possibilities, and you just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, didn't you? Or just about.
Yes, thank you for pointing out my failure. I made it to base camp. I made it to right under 16,000 feet. I will be going back in 2022 to summit.
But the curiosity of experiences, and yet some of the underpinning is the fear of being trapped or confined. And that tension within the 7 of believing that there is still freedom, but they need to learn how to hone in on some of the structure, the mundane things. So I always tell my CEOs, if they are a 7, which there's a lot of them, especially entrepreneurial minds, if you're not going to learn how to structure or be detailed or in the weeds of things, find a right-hand person who can.
Right.
So you can keep dreaming, but you've got to figure out as a 7 how to hone in on task-oriented.
Yeah.
And it's just not your forte. So.
I have no interest.
Yes.
Paperwork will sit on my desk and just sit.
And it's like, mail? I need to open that?
Oh, mail will sit on my desk. And finally, I've told them, quit putting mail on my desk. Why are you putting mail on my desk?
Yes.
So I don't want this mail.
I do think, so what we've learned, even through working with you and the Enneagram and about our types, and I think you just said it as well, is we both like to move quickly. And so we added Jenny to our team.
She's a 1.
As a 1. And I even said this, I think just yesterday to somebody on our team, is I think that I am always trying to move forward, and Jenny helps me stop and think, you need to make sure you get all these pieces together before you just go do.
Right.
And so I always I'm always like, it's better done than perfect. And she's like, it's better perfect
than done.
But
the two of us have a really strong bias to action.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to see a problem or hear about a problem and just sit there.
Yeah.
So, but that's apparently not everyone feels that way. That's not intuitive to everybody, but to me it just feels like, wait, what? This is going on and we're supposed to talk about it for 5 days before we do anything?
And really being able to appreciate what's her motivation behind precision, right?
Right.
And that it's
all about doing the right thing.
Yeah, and being able to appreciate, hey, before we push something out, she's paying attention to all this detail.
And it's so much better.
Yes.
It is. The quality is much better. So let's talk a little bit about how marketers can use the Enneagram. And you're doing some really interesting work with using the Enneagram in diversity and inclusion.
Yes. So, I lead with my trainings in diversity and inclusion with inclusion first. Meaning, if we include all people, the diversity is going to show up. So and this is what I love about the Enneagram. It's a very inclusive system to work with. So anybody can come to the table and learn. Anybody can grow from it. And what I've seen in this particular situation, we've got a project we're working on with Fortune 100 company, a sponsorship program. And there's 50 people, 25 sponsors and 25 proteges, African American proteges. And what the company has found is those African American proteges hit mid-level, and then their pipeline dries out or retention phase away. They can't retain the African American proteges. And we are talking top-notch chemists, really, really, really good talent that this company has. And because they're mindful of what's going on, let's figure this out. And when they approached me, I knew we needed some sort of self-awareness tool. You know, if I'm going to push someone to grow in their blind spots, and push them in growing in their unconscious biases. When we talk around about racial dynamics in the workplace, I need both and the Enneagram was that tool.
Yeah.
So
I'm just curious, where are they going? Are they?
Sure.
What have you found so far?
So what we've discovered in the 6 months that we've launched, I'm doing feedback loops every 3 months. So after each webinar that I do, I'm going to do a feedback loop, gather information. But so far, we've had post work, we did 50 interviews, meaning they were tested, they had a typing interview, and then we asked about 25 questions on inclusion and diversity, race in the workplace. For not only the proteges, but also the sponsors. Then we did a 2-day launch, and that's where the magic showed up, in my opinion. We had these top-level senior leaders partnered and paired with proteges, African-American proteges, both really uncertain about how are we going to do this, because race is a hot topic in the workplace, and equity doesn't always pan out, no matter how smart you are, right? So we did some teaching and training on the Enneagram, and light bulbs started to turn on areas that each person could grow in. And so I was able to access that nugget of, hey, I want to grow. Okay, so let's take it one step farther. Is it possible that systemic racism does exist still today in 2019? And is it possible that maybe we are not all educated on what our whiteness brings to the table? And how that affects the workplace, and what the challenges and barriers are for African American talent in the workplace. And I am telling you, these senior leaders were just chomping at the bit, asking questions, eager to learn. Often, many of them didn't even know about things like code switching, where African American talent switch how they talk in the workplace, how they dress in the workplace. And the minute they walk outside their door and into the workplace, they have to work extra hard to be somebody that they're not. I don't have to. As a white female, I never worry about when I walk out of my home and into my workplace that I'm checking this and checking that. So the discussion around those challenges and barriers, I believe the conduit, the avenue in was the Enneagram, and lowering the defenses and everybody being on equal ground.
I love
with
that.
Personality.
Yeah, and I would just thinking about our team and just workplace teams in general. When I think about it, you can see even it happen at different companies and our company too, where everybody starts to look the same.
Yes.
And then you tend to start to think the same. And so do you have any tips for our listeners on how you can make sure you're including all viewpoints, or just taking a step back, especially for two people who move really quickly? How do you make sure you check yourself?
So I think one thing that's key is to remind yourself that differences actually make the team better. So differences in thought, differences in personality, differences in talent, what they bring to the table, and what a person of color can bring might be different than this person of color, right? So, it's inviting everybody to the table and making sure that you're accessing the potential depth that each person can bring. So in this company, for example, they have people, I think they've got 40,000 employees all over the world. And one senior leader wanted a business meeting to be planned on Friday. Well, the colleagues that needed to join the business meeting were in the Middle East. Well, in the Middle East, they take Fridays off. Well, someone came to the table who actually had lived in the Middle East. His experience in the Middle East gave that senior leader the opportunity to reschedule a very important meeting. So things as simple as that. You know, you gather more of a depth of experiences when you include everybody to the table. And your bottom line's it'll show in your bottom line. You're gonna have better product. Yeah.
And yeah, there's no disputing internally how this is helpful, but externally as well. I feel like as marketers and PR professionals, we need to be able to understand varying perspectives and be inclusive in our efforts.
And I think it starts with a conversation too, right? So I think the fact that you're just talking about race in the workplace and how there are inequities that exist helps open up the conversation for people to be willing to discuss that. And I know there are some companies here in Nashville that are leading the way in that as well. And I think just knowing that there aren't any taboo topics, that it's like, you know, we're doing a photo shoot and we're like, this is it's white. Just all white people, you know, or this messaging is just directed at men, which I feel all the time, you know. So it's just, how do you, just making sure that you have those conversations and that you're thinking about it, that we're thinking about it when we're pitching things and working on ideas and things like that, but also as company leaders.
Well, and go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, it's normal for us to tend to lean towards what is comfortable and what is known. Right. So if we know that in psychology, in personal life, we know it's going to show up in work life. Right. We're going to tend, and same thing with sponsorship programs. Most sponsors feel more comfortable sponsoring someone of the same color than someone of a different color. So if we can move into it with that just normal assumption, that's going to happen. But then you educate on the systemic issues. You know, when we go back into the history of some of these people groups and what they've had to recover from as a people group, that's when I can begin to teach on racial trauma and the generational trauma that's passed down. So if I have a corporate leader now understanding what trauma has done to a certain people group, and then they're trying to recover generations later from that, it's going to show up in the workplace.
Yeah. Right. And going back to, the foundations of a PR campaign one of them is know your audience, research, stakeholder analysis. And I do feel like sometimes looking at people of color and looking at all of the different diversity and groups within an organization or an audience can get overlooked sometimes.
I think the reason I like the Enneagram is because it doesn't put people into boxes, and there's a lot of, you know, differentiation between the numbers, but it's still like it goes back to the why, right? So when you think about that, and going back to, you know, diversity in people groups, when I think about that, sometimes we tend to do this, like we take people and we put them in boxes. And so have you found that the Enneagram, using that among, because I don't know that I know any people of color who've taken the Enneagram that I've talked to or had a conversation with them about that. So have you found that they're perceived differently, whether it's like a black woman who's an 8 or me who's an 8 or a man who's an 8, things like that?
Yes, it's a great question. In inclusion and diversity world, we consider that we have a term called intersection. So the intersection of race and gender, you know. So if I have a African American woman, it's going to look different in the workplace for her than an African American male. So she's going to have what I call layers of things that she's going to be thinking about that the male doesn't. Then you throw in the dynamic. Can we use your cell type as an 8? You throw in an African American 8, female, in the South. Let's throw in another dynamic. Then we got multiple layers of things that this woman is having to think about that can be misperceived, even in her 8-ness. Then you throw in her culture, her race, and now the region in which she's trying to lead her company in. And oftentimes we do take those behaviors and we put our own assumption and our own twist on them, and we can, mistype people. That's why I never type people. I let the type show up in them through questions I ask, or just watching what they say back to me. But that's so key, is one, to know that you may think you know that person's type, but you don't know their motivation. Ask questions. And you can do that with any any person, asking the question, listening to the feedback, you know, and then understanding that there's intersections going on. There might be multiple areas in that person's life that you may not, or I may not as a white person, have to be thinking about. I mean, maybe a little bit of the South influences our leadership as females, right? Even white females. But it takes it up a notch with an African American woman who is an 8 in the South. So, and you could do that with different regions and countries. We can look at that, you know, the oppression of women in the Middle East, and picture being your style type.
Yeah, it wouldn't work
in
very
the Middle
well.
East.
Yeah.
You know, and how frustrating that would be to not live out of your truest self because of your color or because of your gender, you know, your race.
Yeah, and I think it helps to talk about this and have the Enneagram as a tool to help remove some biases that I think people put on others because of how they act, and it's just because of who they are.
Talk a little bit about, let's say I am unfamiliar with the Enneagram, which I was when I first met you. How do you take someone through, what is the process of figuring out your type and beginning to integrate it into your life? I know it was kind of a long process for me because was it a year probably before I finally determined like I'm a 7?
Oh,
Which I
yeah,
think
that's
you
because
guys
you're a 7.
knew. But like, and I think you probably knew pretty immediately. But I kept thinking like, well, am I a 3? Could I be a 6? Do I have some 8 in me? I don't know. Like, I feel like all of them.
Right.
But so how can somebody really hone in on?
So this is what's great about the Enneagram in my perspective is some people know it. It's instantaneous, like a microwave. They get it. They know it.
That was you, I think. You didn't really doubt.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. And then some people, it needs to simmer like the crock pot. You know, they need to really evaluate what's going on underneath their behavior. Why are they doing what they're doing? And that's okay. To each his own, you know. And then you've got the element of sometimes you don't want to be the number. Like I did not want to be my number.
I didn't want to be a 7, which now I want to be a 7.
Yeah.
But which is good because I am.
And that's typically because of what we look at are the drawbacks, you know, to that style type. And I encourage people, you know, it's both and. We're imperfect human beings. There's always going to be growth necessary. Continual learning is what we all need to be in. You know, you don't reach this certain plateau and then you stop learning. So focus on the both and, the stuff that you do bring to the table and the stuff you need to grow in, because that's what makes teams better. You know, if we all just ignored our blind spots, our unconscious biases, you know, this is why I get called in for conflict resolution, is because people can't see it. The Enneagram really kind of provides that framework. And then where to grow and stretch yourself.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, if you look at the 8s, they're the negative qualities of an 8, they're not the most. They're not the best.
Well, but I think
it's like Hitler and Stalin. But then there's like MLK, so you know.
I mean, I think with any number, I heard someone say, it might have been you. I'm sort of like an Enneagram podcast junkie, so I listen to all of them. And then Sharon's like my in-person live expert. But when your stomach kind of starts to turn when you read the negative aspects of a number, it might be because you're recognizing it in yourself. And that's, and I always had that relationship with 7. I would gloss over it because I'm like, not a flake. I'm not like that. And the truth is, I can be a flake. I have to work really hard not to be a flake.
Yes.
But so that for me, like I didn't have that sort of emotion or passion to any other number, but with that I did. And I think you were like that with the 8. You're like, oh.
Well, and there's just some really bad 8s out there.
Well, but there's levels of health with any number,
yes,
right?
I agree.
Yes, in every type. And so just like, you know, with 8s being so closely connected to the emotion of anger, all of our types have anger, right? It's just our relationship with it. You just feel it more so than
immediately.
But again, I try to teach people that's because you're very aware of the injustices and what's not fair. And again, the growth area is to slow it down. Doesn't mean kick it out or you're bad because you feel it. No, it's just how do you slow it down so you can assess and gather all the data. Because you like the energy going forward, the movement.
Right.
Well, and I agree too, because if in the past I had not slowed down and then I've gotten angry and realized that I was wrong, And so knowing now, I would never want to accuse someone or, be in a certain way towards someone not having all the information.
So
and I think Jenny's helped us with that, like having information and slowing down. Yeah,
trying to breathe.
And in your anger, when you're not slowing down, that's when the consequences happen to those around you. And that's why 8s get some of those bad raps, right? I think each style type, though, can have a bad rap. And that's where, we don't use the Enneagram as a weapon to hurt other people. Like, first and foremost, it's for yourself. Use this knowledge for yourself, and then use it in a way where you can learn be curious about other people, engage in your curiosity. And that's what I would say with inclusion and diversity work is engage in curiosity when you bring different people to the table or you're interviewing. What could that person bring to your team that might level up what you already have, that you would overlook because you want to hire what's safe, the safe bet, which is more like you.
Someone who looks like you,
right?
And acts like you.
Yes.
Right. So, Katie, can you talk a little bit about how we have worked with Sharon at Reed?
So it's been really helpful. I think you were the first person we worked with on the Enneagram, or maybe I already knew my number at that point, but when you came in to our organization after some things had happened with our team, and our morale was a little low, some things had changed. And you were able to sit down with us and just talk through and help us understand what had happened and move past that, trauma, as we might call it, but also help us see each other. I found it really helpful. Is that something you do for a lot of?
Yes. So, in your situation, there was a significant stressor that was going on, trauma in the workplace. And oftentimes our organizations see it, but they fail to remedy it. And so what occurs is each of your style types takes on that stressor and will feel it differently, hear it differently, and respond to it differently. And then that's going to create a domino effect of other stressors. So your work productivity is going to go down. People are going to disengage until you really get to the root of what was the residue. I call it your psychological footprint. What have you left behind on the people around you? And with your situation, there was something that was left behind, and it was psychological. And so you needed to do the remedy work, and for each type that showed up differently. But speaking it out loud got it out of the heads, out of the body, out of the heart, people, right? Out onto the table. Now let's look at it. And because we want to address things just kind of in a relaxed, receptive nature, there's no need to there's a solution. We're looking for the solution. So we're not stirring it up. We're just relaxing everybody's type and saying, here, this is what has happened. Now, your company was a victim, I would call, in this situation, but it's your responsibility to recover from it. You're not the reason why, but you're responsible. So oftentimes that's what I'm called in to do, and I use the Enneagram as my base point for that.
Love it. Okay, so we've got a few more minutes as we wrap up. Two questions. So one, if you were not your current number, what number would you like to be? All of us will answer that.
Oh, okay. Like Sharon, you go first. You go first.
Well, I show up in the world as a 7. People often think I'm a 7, but I'm really a 3, and I don't like the struggle of thinking I'm who I am based off of what I do, so I would want to be a 7. I would truly want to be a 7.
I don't really. You've asked me this before, and it's really hard for me. They all seem difficult. Just being a human is hard.
I'd rather be a spirit, an angel.
I don't know. 7s seem to be more carefree, but I know they're actually not.
But yeah, yes. I mean, you're business partners with a 7.
I mean, I'm okay with where I'm at, I think. I think I'm going to just stick with it.
Stick with
I
an
think
8.
I'm just going to be an 8. I mean, Hitler be damned.
So it's funny you say you come across as a 7. People who don't know me very well assume I'm a 3.
And often they're mistyped, yes.
And so I mistyped, because I do have a lot of 3 tendencies, I think. So I mistyped as a 3 for a while I think still knowing deep down I was a 7. If I had to choose, I'd stay a 7. Yeah. But I love 9s. They're so peaceful, and they relax me, and they calm me down. And
I know, but I don't think they feel very relaxed.
No, I mean, you read about like the internal struggle in their head because they don't.
Poor thing.
But nines are just so like,
I have a 9 wing, but yeah.
Right. So wings, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So quickly, do not just direct to resources for like wings and subtypes and things like that, because there's so much more to the Enneagram than what we've talked about today.
Oh, yes.
So what would you want our listeners
so
to know?
we have our main type, we have our wings, and I always say you can't land a plane without both wings. So I look at both sides as being accessible to you. Then you have your lines where you go under stretch and release, growth. It could be the high side or the low side of that. So, and then you have your instincts in there, the 3 different instincts. So really when people say, oh, I'm pigeonholed into this one number, no, you're not. There's more to that. And the deeper you go, the more you learn about yourself. And so I would encourage, if it's any work related, I love Ginger Lapid-Bogda's work in the Enneagram and business. And all of her books have really good, she's a PhD, she's done multiple studies on workplace using the Enneagram in business. And then, obviously Suzanne Stabile, Ian Crone, those are fun favorites for in your personal life and how to build that side of you. I love tests. I'm a fan of tests because I love research too. But I think you really need to sit with your number and read about it. I think reading about it is the best way.
So the first few tests I took, 7 was not my highest number. It was 3 and 8.
Yeah, I think 7 was my
highest. And mine kept testing out as 7 and a 9. And I kept coming back to, I don't know, I think I really struggle with some of those things over there,
And 2 was also high on me. And I've now learned, since we started studying the subtypes, and I think I'm a social 7, which can look like a 2 at times. So the subtypes really made it click. Last thing, every episode we have a fun segment, and we do something different every time. And today's is the juggle is real. So do you have any working mom tips, productivity tips? And honestly, you can just say like, shit, it's all hard, and just, show some empathy for our listeners. But so I am a single mom of 3. And so the juggle is very real.
Yeah.
And we've got 2 dogs. So throw in the 2 dogs.
Oh, yes.
Single mom of 3 and 2 dogs. And for me, what I have found with my type, even if you throw in my type and then my circumstances, is the order of starting my Mondays as a kind of an open free day for me. Because on Fridays, I write all of the things that I didn't do on Friday, didn't get done during the week on Friday. And what's so key for me is having either Saturday or Sunday off, no work. I am a workhorse, and I will work. And I have learned that I've got to have a full day of rest. And not a full day of veg, but a actual day of rest. And there's a difference. So binge watching Crown is not going to happen and make me feel rested.
Yeah, right.
So that's important. It's the structure of my week and turning it off. I have to turn my work off at about 6 o'clock at night, and I don't look at my emails.
Love that.
When I do, my mind goes and I'll start working again.
Right.
So working with my type, it's being mindful of being in the moment, being present, and I can't do that if I'm working all the time.
Let's relate it to our style types. I like that. As someone who leads with 7, I have trouble slowing down as well and just being present and in the moment. So my kind of thing that makes everything else come together for me is I've got to spend time alone, and it usually needs to be in nature. Like Katie can probably tell you, when I'm not running regularly, like out in the woods, I'm a different person. I come across as a different person. I'm grouchy. So I'm so much more productive the other 23 hours of the day or whatever if I can have that 1 hour running in the woods a few times a week.
That reminds me, for all our types, the assertive energies, walking meditations are really helpful, because it is hard for an 8 to slow down, 7 to slow down, and a 3. So you're describing
what's
it.
really funny about walking meditations is I have downloaded them and ran with them, because I don't know how to put on my running shoes and walk.
But it's but you're working with
moving.
It.
Yes. That's funny.
Yes.
Being a puppy mom, I guess. She is crazy, by the way. She's 6 months old.
Yeah, we both have puppies.
Anyway, for me, juggling things, I can be a workaholic too. So it's back to what you do as well. I have to shut it off at a certain time and just know, like, I've got my list and know that I'm going to get done what I need to get done, and I'm going to take anything that comes at me, but I have to know when to say no as well. And I've started reading, which is an older book, but it's The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. And won't say it all. But
well, you can just say and bleep it out.
I need to give less fucks about things because I seem to care a lot about everything.
Yes.
So
and it's funny because
to get better.
You give a lot of fucks about things, and we say I either give way too many fucks or zero fucks about something. There's no in between for me.
Right.
Like I don't care, or we should say curve of concern. That's
I
probably
told Allison
the business term would be curve of concern. Like where is this on your curve of concern? It's either way up there or not. Like don't even talk to me about it.
So I'm trying to do better about letting go. So Sharon, thank you so much for being with us today. It was great to have you here and talk about the Enneagram and diversity and inclusion. And for all of our listeners out there today, our key takeaway really is when it comes to diversity and inclusion, you just start by having the conversation, knowing that no one is the same, and start by talking about that or having that conversation.
And it seems like the Enneagram is a really great tool to get that conversation going. So if you're unsure of how to bring this up to your decision makers, your stakeholders, there's a lot of resources on the Enneagram. We'll link to them in our podcast notes. We'll link to Sharon's website as well. And Sharon, you work with teams across the country, right?
Yes, we do. Yes.
Great.
Yes. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. This is fun.